Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be my full review of this knife, and this, as you can see, is the Jack Wolf Knives Vampire Fix EDC. So this is the fixed blade version of the Vampire Jack, and this is the newest model from Jack Wolf Knives, coming out here in April of 2025, and it is the second fixed blade model that Jack Wolf Knives has done, or technically the third. And so why do I say that? Well, firstly, they did the Midnight Fix EDC, which is a really cool little sheepfoot coffin handled fixed blade. And then they did a very limited run of the Vampire Hunter. So the Vampire Hunter is a knife that I don't have. I will put a picture up for you here, but it is the first USA made knife from Jack Wolf Knives. So this is made in China, as well as the other Jack Wolf Knives have been. The Vampire Hunter was basically a larger version of this Vampire Fix EDC. And it was made by LT Wright Knives and limited to being sold at Blade Show. There were, I think, 40 made, so it's very limited. I am hoping to get one of those if they're made available again at the upcoming Blade Show. But either way, this is the second of the kind of general release fixed blades that Jack Wolf Knives has done, although it's technically the third. So first of all, I want to show you the packaging. I didn't get a chance to do an unboxing of this knife, and as always, Jack Wolf Knives, Ben and Donnie do a great job of the packaging on these knives, so I think it's worth checking out. So here is the box, and going along with the kind of 80s and 90s nostalgia theme, it is very similar looking to a VHS box. So I grew up watching VHSs. I'm sure a lot of people watching this either grew up watching them or, you know, watched them when they were kind of the typical way of watching a movie. And so I think that's really cool. You can see this has the great, very comic book style art of Sean Tiffany, as this is a first release of this model. The first release of each model has Sean Tiffany as the artist for the cover art or tube art, whatever you want to call it here. And you can see that it's Jack Wolf fighting Dracula or some vampire there. So really cool, again, very comic booky. And you can see a Jack Wolf Knives everyday carry fixed blade knife. And then same deal here. You can see this has a 2. So I'm thinking I actually don't have the Midnight Fix EDC box with me here, but I'm guessing that it has a 1 on it. And then on the back here is a write-up. I definitely recommend reading that. It kind of goes into why Ben started the company and just a nice little write-up. And as you can see, I have the rosewood version. There's several different versions. There's a really cool red synthetic version with a black coated blade that is very, very, you know, vampire-y looking. And then there is a full titanium version with a new milling pattern on the handle. There's also a camo carbon. I think it's 80s camo carbon. And then there's also, what is the other one? I'm forgetting what the other one is. But anyway, you can see this has a really cool castle design here. So that's the Dracula's castle. And then when you open it, it's a sleeve, and you have the Jack Wolf Knives, nice shiny logo there, which I always enjoy. And then it comes like so. The knife is in here, and then you have the sheath. Now, I'm actually going to talk about the sheath first. I think the sheath is really great on this knife. So you can see this is a very nicely made, nice looking leather sheath. And so the sheaths here are, I think, something that differentiates it from a lot of other fixed blades, and really especially fixed blades that are, you know, coming from China, that are made in China. This is a really, really nicely done sheath. I believe, and I will correct this if I'm wrong, but I believe that these are made by Taylor Cortez, who does the other kind of higher end leather work for Jack Wolf Knives, like this Cordovan slip that I got. but I'm not 100% sure on that. So if I'm wrong, I will, correct it. But I believe they are, and they are made really, really nicely. And I think that there's some good upgrades on this over the sheath for the Midnight Fixed EDC. Now, I like this sheath. I think it's pretty ingenious. I talked about how, when you put this in my video, I talked about how when you put this in, you can just put the corner of the spine there against either side. It works either way. And slide it in pretty easily. And then the tip is going to be hitting into this area here. Now, this sheath I have used a good bit. I've carried this knife, pretty regularly, and it has less retention than this one does. Now, what I think part of that is probably just that the Vampire Fixed EDC sheath is overall, it is a little bit thinner, like less wide, so it keeps a little bit more of its rigidity. And then also the blade can go in there, or the handle can go in there pretty far, but it doesn't actually open the sheath as much. And so I want to show you why. So if you look at least this version of the Midnight Fixed EDC as compared to the Vampire Fixed EDC, you can see that there is much less of this kind of bevel here. This has this nice bevel, and this does not. It has a little bit, it's not just a hard corner, but it doesn't have anywhere near as much of a bevel. So it doesn't force the sheath open quite as much, I would say. You can see that this one is pretty wide from, putting the knife in and out. This one is less so. So it could also be a factor of the thickness, but I don't think there's much of a difference in the thickness of the handles. And it also, of course, could be a factor of this knife has been put in and out less. But I think partly it is due to that bevel, and then partly also it's due to the shape of the handle. So this Vampire Fixed EDC is what I would call a coffin handle, a swell center coffin handle. So it's interesting because I would also call this a coffin handle because of the hard lines here in the shape of a coffin. This has the swell center, so it has the swells at the center of the handle, but it also still has kind of a coffin shape. And so I'll give you a comparison to another swell center knife. This is a Gradation Cutlery, and you can see that a swell center typically is just going to have a rounded bottom and a rounded top. Here is a swell center Rosecraft, and you can see again rounded top, rounded bottom. So it is still kind of a coffin handle, but it's a swell center coffin handle, and the swell actually gives it some more retention in there. So I do think that this sheath is going to hold the knife in a little bit more. Not that I have had any issues with the Midnight Fixed ED sheath. Now I also found that it's just easier to put the knife in because of that bevel. So you can slide it in pretty, intuitively when it's in your pocket, whereas you do have to be a little bit careful about, getting this going in the right angle and such. Again, not an issue. I like this sheath, no real issue with it, but I think it's a little easier on this one. Now you can see here also that the clips on these, first of all, they are a little different looking. I'm not sure if it's just a different powder coat or something. It's something I actually just noticed right now, but they are a little bit different looking, but the position is different. So you can see that the Midnight Fixed EDC is going to sit quite a bit lower. Now for me, I actually like that. So it does not seem to me like this sits too high in the pocket. I do think these are pocket carry fixed blades, and so it doesn't sit too high in the pocket. It just makes it a little bit, more accessible. But it does sit higher, and every now and then when I was, bending my legs a lot or something, I would feel the butt of the handle against my hip. But, no issue there, and I do like the location of the clip. Another thing is that Ben said every now and then they would have where just, I think because of the pointiness of this and just the construction of the sheath and such, they would have some of these threads get cut on the Midnight Fix EDC sheath, whereas they think that they've fixed that on this, and I haven't had any issues. To be honest, I haven't had any issues on this one either. So, you know, but there's going to be issues on, you know, when you have a production run of knives, there's going to be some issues here and there. I don't think that it's a problem, and it sounds like they think that they've fixed why it happened rarely on this. So I really like the sheath. I know I've talked about it a lot, but I think that it's a good upgrade here on this knife. Another upgrade is that they've included a lanyard and a titanium bead. So I actually am considering putting this titanium bead on this knife because it would match really well. You can see the Midnight Fix EDC in titanium has blue hardware, so this blue bead would go really nicely with it. So I might switch it around actually, but it is a nice touch that these come with a lanyard for a couple reasons. First of all, it makes it a little easier to pull it out of the sheath. And then secondly, with how I've been holding this knife, it gives me basically an extra finger hold. And so that's another thing, kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about on this knife is the grip. I actually had some people asking about, is it comfortable? Are there hot spots because of these? And I would say that these swells in the center here are a little bit larger than maybe is typical for a traditional swell center. They seem to protrude a little bit more than on the Vampire Hunter, the LT Wright version, but it's also just a much bigger knife. But I didn't really have any issues. Now, I will say, you know, might think, oh, should I have two fingers on each side of that swell center? And at least for me, that's not how I would actually hold it. I have pretty wide hands. I would say, like, you know, significantly wide hands, fat fingers, if you want to say. And so I'm real close to the edge when I do that. So instead, I mostly held it like this. And so you get a nice little kind of reverse thumb ramp on this area here, one finger up here, and then a finger below the swell center, and then kind of one or two on the lanyard. And so it gives you a pretty good grip. You know, this is not like a go out and survive in the wilderness for, honestly, you probably could actually, but it's not really made to be like a bushcraft knife and things like that. This is an EDC knife, as the box said. So, you know, it's not intended for super heavy usage where you need a super, you know, hammer style grip on it. The truth is, I think most of the time when I'm using a knife, it's more going to be in a pinch style grip, and this works fine. You know, there's no real hot spots in my experience with the swell centers. They're not really that big, and even if you did just like hold right on one like this, I don't think it's going to make a big difference in the uses that you're going to be using this knife for. And so I use this knife for garden work, for some food prep, and just general EDC, and the handle felt good in all of those. I actually was cutting plastic off of some chicken wire and just, you know, mangled the edge basically and sharpened it, and it sharpened nicely. This S90V is great, and you really can't get too much more classic of a spear point blade than this. I think that this is really one of the nicest, most classic spear points that I have seen anywhere. It's one of the things that I really like about the Vampire Jack. And so I want to talk about that. One of the things that way back when I first saw the prototypes of Jack Wolf knives at the Great Eastern Cutlery Rendezvous was how surprised I was with the Vampire Jack and how comfortable it was in the hand. So, you know, you look at it and you think it would be uncomfortable, but as I've talked about in all my videos on this, it's very, very comfortable. Now, I want to show you that the handle on the Vampire Fixed EDC is like significantly shorter than the Vampire Jack. So it has basically the same blade. So I'll show you here the blades. The blades are basically the same length, but then the handle on the Vampire Fixed EDC is a good bit shorter. It's basically if you take the swell center there and just kind of cut off the bottom and top end somewhat, you get the Vampire Fixed EDC handle. So, you know, I think that this handle is more comfortable for me, more kind of just a natural grabbing it like this, but I didn't see any issues in use, and I love this blade shape. I think that this is just such a classic blade shape. Now, as compared to, I'm just going to show you real quick. That was from the second run of the Vampire Jack, and this is from the first run of the Vampire Jack. So this one's a little bit more similar looking in its styling, but I just want to show you a size comparison pretty directly here with the Midnight Fixed EDC. You can see that the handles are really similar. So it's not that the Vampire Fixed EDC has a smaller handle than the Midnight Fixed EDC. They're just a little bit of a different shape because this is more just straight. You know, I kind of can get 3 fingers right up to this kind of kick looking thing. It's not really a kick. I wouldn't really call it a guard, but you know, I can get 3.5 fingers, we'll say, right up onto there. Whereas there is no guard or kick on this. And so it's just a little bit different. But as for the styling, so like I say, this is the rosewood version. It has a hand satin. I think it looks great, and I think it really fits the theme. So, you know, the theme here is that one of the ways that they say you can kill a vampire is with a stake, a wooden stake. And so I think having this rosewood handle, these rosewood scales, really fits the theme and looks really great. I had some people, you know, say that they really like the grain on mine. You're gonna have different grain on these, and in fact, I know at Traditional Pocket Knives, Austin is doing individual pictures of these. So that's a great opportunity to make sure you get one that you like, whether it be the rosewood or any of the versions. So as always, I recommend, you know, you get your Jack Wolf knives from Traditional Pocket Knives or from Knife Ship Free. But at Traditional Pocket Knives, you'll be able to pick the individual, you know, actual knife, not just the model. So make sure you get it there. You can use the link in the description to do that. And I think it just looks really good. The hand satin is very classic, gives it kind of a handmade look, and just overall a really cool little knife that I have enjoyed carrying and using a lot. And I think people are going to really like these, especially if you are a pocket fixed blade person. So as always, I want to say thank you to Ben for sending this for me to check out, and everything that everybody does there at Jack Wolf Knives. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and select all so you know when I post new videos. Also, go to my website, knifethoughts.com, check out my articles there, and subscribe to the email newsletter. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.